The smell of whiskey hit Johnny Cash before he even saw the man. It was October 23rd, 1971, at the San Quentin State Prison in California, and 20,000 inmates packed the mess hall for what would become one of the most legendary concerts in music history. But nobody knew that yet. All they knew was that Johnny Cash, the man in black himself, was about to take the stage for his second performance at the maximum security prison. The drunk man pushed through the crowd of prisoners, his denim shirt soaked with sweat and cheap bourbon someone had smuggled in. His name was Marcus Thompson, serving 15 years for armed robbery, and he had something to prove. At 6'4" and 240 pounds, Marcus towered over most of the other inmates. His knuckles bore the scars of countless prison fights, and his bloodshot eyes locked onto the stage where Cash was tuning his guitar. "Hey, Cash," Marcus slurred, his voice cutting through the pre-show chatter like a rusty blade. "You think you're something special, coming here to sing for us criminals. You ain't nothing but a fake." The entire mess hall went silent. 20,000 hardened criminals held their breath. The guards reached for their batons. June Carter, standing in the wings with the Tennessee Three, felt her heart skip. She knew her husband's temper. She knew what happened the last time someone challenged him publicly. That was in '68, and it nearly ended his career. But Johnny Cash did something nobody expected. He set down his black Gibson acoustic guitar, walked to the very edge of the stage, and looked Marcus Thompson directly in the eyes. What happened next would be talked about in that prison for the next 50 years. "You're right," Cash said, his deep voice carrying to every corner of that concrete hall. "I am a fake. Every single day I wake up, and I put on this black suit and I pretend I've got it all together. But you want to know something, friend? I've been exactly where you are." Marcus swayed on his feet, confused. This wasn't the reaction he expected. The other inmates watched, transfixed, as Johnny Cash, the famous country star who'd sold millions of records, began to unbutton his black coat. "1955, Cash continued, his voice steady but raw with emotion. "El Paso, Texas. I was so drunk and high on amphetamines that I tried to kick down the door of a nightclub after they threw me out. The police found me passed out in the alley with a bag of pills in my pocket. They could have sent me away for 5 years. The only difference between you and me, Marcus, is that I got lucky. I had a judge who gave me one more chance." The mess hall remained dead silent. Marcus Thompson's jaw had gone slack. Nobody had told him Cash knew his name. What Marcus didn't know was that Johnny had insisted on reading the files of every death row inmate before the concert. He'd spent 3 days memorizing names and stories because to him these weren't just prisoners. They were human beings. You know what else? Cash stepped down from the stage, something his security detail explicitly told him never to do. He walked straight toward Marcus, no fear in his eyes. "I know you've got a daughter, Sarah. She's 7 years old. Lives with your mama in Bakersfield." Tears began forming in Marcus Thompson's bloodshot eyes. Nobody had mentioned his daughter's name in 3 years. "I know, because I called your mama yesterday," Cash said, now standing directly in front of the drunk heckler. "She told me Sarah prays for you every night. She told me Sarah still believes her daddy is a good man who made a bad mistake." The guards were frozen, unsure whether to intervene. June Carter had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She'd been there when Johnny made that call, spending his own money on long-distance charges to track down an inmate's family. Marcus Thompson, the giant of a man who'd terrorized Cell Block D for 2 years, began to sob. His massive shoulders shook as years of suppressed emotion broke through. She still prays for me?" "Every single night," Cash confirmed, placing his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "And you know what else your mama told me? She said you used to sing to Sarah when she was a baby, said you had a beautiful voice." The revelation sent whispers through the crowd. Marcus Thompson, the prison enforcer, used to sing lullabies? "Why don't you come up here and sing with me?" Cash asked, his voice gentle but firm. "Let's record something for Sarah. I'll make sure she gets it." What followed was the most extraordinary moment in prison concert history. Marcus Thompson, drunk and broken, climbed onto that stage. Johnny Cash handed him a microphone, and together, with 20,000 inmates as witnesses, they sang "Peace in the Valley," an old gospel hymn that Marcus's grandmother had taught him when he was a boy. Marcus's voice, rough from years of cigarettes and prison hooch, cracked on the high notes. But there was something pure in it, something that reached past the concrete walls and razor wire. Hardened killers wiped tears from their eyes. Gang leaders, who hadn't shown emotion in decades, stood with their hands over their hearts. When the song ended, the applause was deafening. But Johnny Cash wasn't done. He turned to the crowd and said, "Every single one of you has someone who loves you. Every single one of you is more than your worst mistake. Marcus here is going to help me prove that today." For the next 2 hours, Johnny Cash performed the concert of his life. But he kept bringing Marcus back on stage. They sang Folsom Prison Blues together, with Marcus adding verses about his own experiences. They performed Ring of Fire, and Marcus told the crowd how that song played on the radio the day he was arrested, how he thought his life was over. Between songs, Cash shared his own struggles with addiction. He talked about the time he nearly drove his truck off a cliff in California, so high on pills he thought he could fly. He talked about June saving his life, about finding faith not in perfection, but in redemption. He made every inmate in that room feel seen, feel human, feel like they mattered. The guards later reported it was the most peaceful month in the prison's history following that concert. Fights dropped by 80%. Marcus Thompson became a different man. He started a prison choir, teaching other inmates the gospel songs his grandmother had taught him. He wrote letters to Sarah every week, telling her he was learning to be the father she deserved. But here's the part of the story that most people don't know. Johnny Cash didn't just perform and leave. He set up a fund for Marcus Thompson's daughter's education. He paid for Marcus to get his high school diploma through correspondence courses. He visited Marcus every 6 months for the next 3 years, bringing new guitars for the prison music program he helped establish. When Marcus Thompson was released in 1974, there was a job waiting for him at Cash's recording studio in Nashville, not as a janitor or security guard, but as a backing vocalist. Marcus toured with Johnny Cash for 7 years, singing harmony on some of the most iconic recordings of the 70s. His daughter Sarah grew up backstage at the Grand Ole Opry, surrounded by music and proof that redemption was possible. The drunk heckler, who challenged Johnny Cash that October day in 1971, died in 2008, a successful music teacher in Tennessee with 5 grandchildren who called him Papa Mark. At his funeral, June Carter Cash's son played a recording from that day at San Quentin. There wasn't a dry eye in that Memphis church as they heard Marcus Thompson's broken voice singing gospel with Johnny Cash, 2 flawed men finding grace in the most unlikely place. Johnny Cash passed away in 2003, just 4 months after June. But before he died, he said in an interview with Rolling Stone that the moment with Marcus Thompson was when he truly understood his calling. "I wasn't meant to be perfect," Cash said, his voice weak from diabetes, but still carrying that unmistakable gravity. "I was meant to show other imperfect people that they were worth saving." The San Quentin concert recording went platinum 3 times over. But if you listen carefully to the album, you can hear something the producers tried to edit out. Right after Peace in the Valley, you can hear Johnny Cash whisper to Marcus Thompson, "You're going to be okay, brother. I promise you're going to be okay." He kept that promise. Today, the Marcus Thompson Music Education Foundation has provided instruments and lessons to over 10,000 children of incarcerated parents. Sarah Thompson Williams, Marcus's daughter, runs the foundation from an office in Nashville, in the same building where her father once sang backup for Johnny Cash. On the wall hangs a black and white photograph from October 23, 1971. Johnny Cash with his arm around a crying giant of a man, 20,000 inmates on their feet, applauding not for a concert, but for the proof that everyone deserves a second chance. The security footage from that day at San Quentin still exists in the California Department of Corrections archives. Prison officials use it in training videos, not for security protocols, but for a course called the Humanity Initiative. It shows the exact moment when Johnny Cash, instead of having Marcus Thompson removed by security, chose compassion over conflict. It shows how one decision, one moment of seeing someone's pain instead of their anger, changed countless lives. Luther Perkins, Cash's guitarist that day, later said it was the most frightened he'd ever been on stage. When that drunk man started yelling, I thought we were about to have a riot. 20,000 prisoners and one wrong move could have ended everything. But Johnny saw something none of us did. He saw a man who just needed to be heard. Marshall Grant, the bassist, added in his memoir, Johnny had this supernatural ability to recognize himself in broken people, maybe because he never forgot how broken he'd been. That day at San Quentin, when he walked toward that heckler instead of away from him, I realized Johnny wasn't just a musician, he was a healer. The warden at San Quentin, Robert Nelson, documented the incident in his official report. He wrote, in 30 years of corrections work, I have never witnessed anything like what occurred on October 23rd. Cash turned what could have been a violent confrontation into a moment of transformation. The recidivism rate for inmates who attended that concert was 40% lower than the general population. We started calling it the Cash effect. Even the guards were changed. Officer Daniel Martinez, who had his hand on his baton when Marcus started heckling, became an advocate for arts programs in prisons. He said, I went home that night and hugged my kids. I'd been seeing those inmates as animals for so long, I'd forgotten they were fathers and sons, too. Cash reminded us all of our humanity. But perhaps the most powerful testimony comes from Marcus Thompson himself, in a letter he wrote to Johnny Cash in 2002, a year before Cash's death. Johnny, you probably saved 100 lives that day, starting with mine. I was planning to attack you and go out in what I thought would be a blaze of glory, because I didn't think I had anything left to live for. When you said my daughter's name, when you told me she still prayed for me, you gave me back my reason to live. Every child I've taught music to, every life I've touched exists because you chose to see me as human when I couldn't even see it myself. Thank you for showing me that our mistakes don't define us. Our response to grace does. Johnny Cash read that letter on stage at his final concert at the Carter Family Fold in Virginia, his voice breaking as he told the audience, if I've done anything right in this life, it was learning that the people who seem the most lost are usually the ones who need love the most. Never pass up a chance to show someone they matter. You might be saving a life you didn't even know was in danger. The ripple effects continue today. 3 of Marcus Thompson's former music students have won Grammy Awards. 15 have become music teachers themselves. His daughter Sarah has testified before Congress about criminal justice reform, always beginning with the story of October 23, 1971. My father was drunk and angry and broken, she tells lawmakers. Johnny Cash could have had him removed. Instead, he showed him compassion. That single act of kindness didn't just change my father's life. It changed the trajectory of our entire family for generations. This is what rehabilitation looks like. This is what redemption sounds like. It sounds like Johnny Cash harmonizing with a drunk heckler, proving that everyone has a song worth singing. The original recording equipment from that San Quentin concert is now in the Country Music Hall of Fame. But the microphone Marcus Thompson used, the one Johnny Cash handed to a drunk, angry convict, stays in Sarah's office. Sometimes, when she's having a hard day, she holds it and remembers that October afternoon when 20,000 people witnessed what happens when we choose compassion over judgment, when we see the human behind the heckler. That's the thing about Johnny Cash. He didn't just sing about walking the line, he showed others how to find their way back when they'd crossed it. And on that October day in 1971, in front of 20,000 witnesses in one of America's toughest prisons, he proved that sometimes the best response to a challenge is to extend a hand instead of raising a fist. The drunk heckler who tried to ruin Johnny Cash's concert became one of his closest friends. The interrupted performance became the most legendary prison concert in history. And a moment that could have ended in violence became a masterclass in the transformative power of human compassion. 20,000 inmates saw it happen. Now you know the story too. The question is, who's your Marcus Thompson? Who in your life seems too far gone, too broken, too angry to reach? Because if Johnny Cash taught us anything that day at San Quentin, it's that the people who push us away the hardest are usually the ones who need us to step closer the most. What will you do the next time someone challenges you? Will you have them removed, or will you see the pain behind their provocation? Will you meet anger with anger, or will you do what Johnny Cash did and stun everyone with unexpected grace? The choice is yours. But remember, 20,000 people are always watching, and you never know which moment of compassion might change everything. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that they matter. Comment below with a time when someone showed you unexpected kindness when you least deserved it. And subscribe to hear more incredible true stories of moments when celebrities chose compassion over conflict, when a single decision changed thousands of lives. Because that's what Johnny Cash knew that October day in San Quentin. We're all just one act of kindness away from a completely different life. The only question is whether we'll be the one to offer it, or whether we'll be lucky enough to receive it. The man in black walked into that prison as a country music legend. He walked out as something more. He walked out as proof that redemption isn't just possible, it's powerful enough to echo through generations. And it all started when he chose to see a drunk heckler not as a problem to be solved, but as a person to be saved.